This video is dedicated by the Huberfeld family in memory of Pinchas ben Moshe Aaron Huberfeld, Alav Shalom. Hello and welcome to Jewish History in Daf Yomi. I think it's great that we're going to be beginning a new Masechta now, and so I'd like to spend some time talking about the page itself, right? Normally we spend time talking about the history of what's in the Daf, but when we begin a Masechta, we talk about the history of the Daf itself. And one of the most important commentaries or sort of supporting materials on the Daf is a commentary called Mesoras Hashas, the tradition of the six orders, which is a really useful commentary. I'm sure you use it in your own learning, where there will be cross references to parallel passages elsewhere in the Talmud. Really important, especially in the pre-internet era, when you want to look up another discussion or the locus classicus of a particular passage. So this particular valuable and really encyclopedic commentary was written by a man named Isaiah Berlin. His father's name was Yehuda Leib, and he was also known as Isaiah Pick after his father-in-law, whose name was Wolf Pick. It was not at all that uncommon. He lived in the 18th century for people to use surnames taken from their in-laws. The Maharsha also has a similar thing, where because his father-in-law, Wolf Pick, has supported him significantly in his learning, so he was often known simply as Yeshayahu Pick or Isaiah Pick after his father-in-law, even though he was really known by the surname Berlin. And by the way, this name Berlin isn't really a surname, because this was the era where people were just beginning to pick up surnames. Jews had not used, for the most part, surnames, but in the 18th century, as governments became much more sophisticated and bureaucracies and so on, they started demanding that Jews take on surnames. That's a lot of interesting history, but not for now. Anyways, he picked up the name Berlin because, of course, even though he was born in Hungary in 1725, he moved to Berlin, and that's where he got the final name Berlin. Okay, sorry for that excursus. At any rate, he was not originally a rabbi. He spent almost all of his time, even though he was a very talented student, he studied primarily with his father, he was a businessman for a long time. But he eventually, towards the later part of his life, he accepted a rabbinical position, and he actually staked out some really important communal positions as well as his scholarship, such as Mesoras Hashas. He was really brutally opposed by the Maskilim of Berlin, and that was like the center of the Haskalah, the Jewish Enlightenment. But nevertheless, he was known as a very gentle, kind person who got along with everybody, and so he was elected on a popular vote that set aside the concerns of the Maskilim, that he was not sufficiently modern or forward-looking in terms of the progressive values of that community. He was also known, by the way, to be very positively inclined towards the emerging Hasidic movement. That was not very strong in Berlin, but nevertheless he had some positive relationships with Hasidic teachers. Now, the Mesoras Hashas itself was actually based on an earlier work by a rabbi of Frankfurt named Joseph Samuel. It first appeared in print after the death of Rabbi Berlin in the years 1800 to 1804. But he wrote quite a few other works as well, works on the Sheiltot, a lot of reference works like a tremendous commentary on the Aruch, a very important medieval dictionary, and a fascinating book called Kashos Miyushav, which means the answered questions, in which he answers every single passage in the Talmud that has the word kasha, meaning it's difficult. He also works in extra Talmudic literature, such as the poetry of Kalir, Elazar Kalir, a very important Paitan. So fascinating, well-rounded, well-liked individual, and thankfully we have his Mesoras Hashas, which is so useful to us today. By the way, I went to Kollel the other night, and I ran into Dr. Huberfeld, who asked me a question about the Mesoras Hashas. And I should also state here that the fact is, the originator of Mesoras Hashas was actually Yehoshua Boaz, who we've spoken about a long time ago. But because the nature of this commentary is such that it was built upon several times by several individuals, the actual credit of who wrote Mesoras Hashas seems to be a little bit in dispute. Our subject, Yeshayahu Berlin definitely did a major section of it, perhaps the lion's share, and so that's why many authors credit him with authorship of this particular book. But it appears that Masoras Hashas, that finding aid, was originally initiated by Yehoshua Boaz, who we've spoken about previously. Okay, I hope this illuminated your daf, and I wish you atzlacha in your learning.